It is working. Good evening, everyone. It works. I'm pleased to say. Yes, we've fixed the microphones. Can everyone hear? Can you hear in the gallery? Yes, they're all great. Yeah, there was this little switch on the connections outside somewhere that was stopping it broadcasting properly last time. So. Thank you for that. Right, so welcome to July's Cabinet meeting, which is actually the first Cabinet meeting since the Council AGM, which seems such a long time ago. A few things have happened since then. As you know, before the formal start of the meeting, I have a couple of sort of usual announcements. The emergency evacuation procedures are, if the alarm goes off, please leave the building and assemble by the War Memorial on Duke Street, and please remain there until it's safe to return. Please put your mobile phone to off or silent, and anyone attending the meeting can film it, but only the people sitting around the table. The meeting is being broadcast via YouTube and recorded. And yes, please remember to turn on your microphone when speaking and turn it off when you're not. So yes, there we go. That's the pre-meeting announcements. First item on the agenda is apologies, and I have one very important apology. Councillor Goldman has been elected as Member of Parliament for Chelmsford and is being inducted over the next couple of days, and that's why she's not here. The Liberal Democrat group will be electing a new deputy leader and cabinet member over the next couple of weeks, and I will make an announcement when that process has been concluded. Thank you very much. Yes, it's really great, if I can just say as an aside, that I think that there are so many councillors who have been elected to Parliament, and I hope they will take their experience of local government to Westminster and be able to make the case from all parties, because I think collectively we all agree that local government's voice needs to be heard more strongly at Westminster and in Whitehall. So yes, I think that's a welcome development. Certainly 35 of our 72 are councillors, so there we go. Anyone else?
Yes, also apologies from Councillors Jeeps and Rayton.
Thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Councillor Dudley?
Yes, I have a non-disclosable interest in item 6.1, so I'll be leaving when that item is discussed.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, next item is minutes. Can I sign the minutes of the 12th of March?
Agreed.
And nothing was called in from that meeting. Item 4 is public questions. We've had one, but as it's relating to the pylons item which is coming up, I'll take it when we get to that item in a couple of items' time, if that's okay, when Councillor Moore has presented her report. Okay, so that moves us on to members' questions. Questions from members on issues for which the Cabinet is responsible. Do we have any questions? Yeah. Lots. Okay.
The new Labour government has announced that mandatory targets for house building will be reintroduced. Will the City Council need to revise the current local plan review to incorporate this amendment and then reconsult our residents, as this could make a significant difference? And if so, what would be the expected timescale for this work to be carried out and for a new consultation to take place?
Councillor Moore, do you want to have a go at that?
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Yes, we were aware before the election that the likely Chancellor would be announcing these revisions, quite bold targets, and as I understand it, planning officers across Essex are lobbying for a 6-month extension to the local plan review, according to Mr. Potter, to make sure that everything's in place and we don't rush in having just, during this period of consultation that's just occurred, that we make sure that we are aligning with any new policies in that national planning policy framework.
Another one? Yep. Back to the new Labour government announcing that councils will have to review their greenbelt land with the intention of creating a grey belt land classification, whatever that is. A series of questions, therefore. Is the Cabinet happy with this new policy? How will it be addressed? And do we have the required number of planning officers to carry out this task? Will the City Council need to revise the local plan for that as well, as opposed to the number of houses? And again, what timescale? So is that covered by your earlier comments about the 6 months, really?
Once again, we were offered an extra 300 planning officers, unfortunately not all in Chelmsford, by the Chancellor. I'm afraid I haven't had time to be briefed by our planning team on that aspect. So a green belt review could be forthcoming, but as yet we are as mystified as you are by the grey belt, and we'll see perhaps what unfolds in the coming weeks, and we'll certainly share any findings from officers with you.
On to Waterside, where else, of course. Accepted that due to commercial confidentiality, some of the answers may have to be given in the absence of the public, although, in fact, the minutes of the meeting did have all the details in which, apart from names and amounts and so on. So, could the Cabinet member advise us how the process of restarting the work is proceeding and the expected timescale before a report is made to full council? Given it is essential that a new valuation of the 3 sites is a prerequisite for any new plans, when will these be available to members? Will the proposed redevelopment of the meadows affect the overall plans for Waterside? Should a new master plan be drawn up to enhance the council's vision for the city centre as a result of the plans for the meadows? And can the Cabinet member confirm that as a result of the meadows plans, there would be no loss of car parking spaces, which would affect the high street in Chelmsford?
Councillor Foster?
Thank you. It's quite difficult to know what I can say in this part of the meeting, what I can't.
Suggesting you want to say it later then.
That's it. Would that be? I think that would be perhaps more appropriate.
Final one. The City Council has set up a number of panels which we were told we were going to be advised of who is on what and what responsibility they have. Are these now available to members with sort of details of what their functions will be? Because time is passing, as you say. Yeah.
Did you have any in particular in mind? You said a number of panels. Did you have?
Well, I've mentioned the Waterside panel in the past, but not just that. I mean, we have other panels, which we used to publish lists of who's on them, and we don't seem to have done so far, I'm aware.
So we, as coming later on in the Constitution, we're about to get rid of one of them. So, in the working group that you attended. We will update the membership of the Waterside panel and announce that very soon, and Lorraine Brown will make sure that the relevant pages on the Constitution and the website are updated to reflect that. And there will be a slight change in membership of the Waterside panel because of the MP having and not being on the panel anymore, amongst other things. So we will update that, and we'll make an announcement with all those changes in a couple of weeks' time. Hopefully, I can get most of that done by then. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. Right. Any other questions? No. Right. Yes. So that was question time. Item 6 is the community infrastructure levy item, which I'm taking instead of Councillor Dudley. It's a relatively minor item. Some time ago, I think it was 2018, certainly before the 2019 election, it was agreed to give a grant to the St Andrews Scouts to re-roof their Scout Hall. And that Scout Hall is now being condemned as unusable. And so the proposition coming before Cabinet is to reallocate some of that money to fund some work on the church hall, which will benefit the Scouts as originally proposed, but they now meet in the church hall instead of in their own Scout hut. Any questions? Councillor Steele.
Thank you. I've got no particular issue with this suggestion, this proposal. First, can I start by congratulating Councillor Goldman on win as an MP, or do we call her Right Honourable Goldman now, I suppose? I've got no particular issue with this proposal, but I do have some concerns around some of the CIL spend. You're right, it goes back to 2018 when £80,000 was proposed for the Scout group, and great for me because I'm actually a Scout chairman in my local area, and actually we're desperate for funds in my area, and I've been personally responsible for obtaining several grants for our buildings, but unfortunately we sit in an area where there's no CIL available, very little CIL. And then you read about £80,000 being made available to a Scout group, which is a heck of a lot of money. But then it turns out they didn't really need it. So several years later, it wasn't actually necessary. And you kind of get the impression that we're scratching around with lots of surplus CIL, looking for projects to spend it on. Now, I was told that on average, CIL and S106 adds about £35,000 to the average house that's built on a new estate. And that does get passed on to the people who buy the house. It doesn't come out of the profits of the developers. And I understand if you don't spend it within 10 years, it goes back. So presumably it goes back into the profits of the developers. I know lots of community organisations who are desperate for funds, but they're in CIL poor areas rather than it being in CIL rich areas. And I just wonder, is there an opportunity to somehow balance this out? Is there any opportunity for the ones that have not got access to CIL to get access to some of the surplus CIL if we really are struggling to spend it? Because the last thing we want to do is give it back. That's the question.
Right, well, we don't have to give it back. It's Section 106 money, sometimes you had to give it back, but we've tried very hard not to accept conditions like that. And the SIL money is directly related to development, as you were saying, that it arises from places which have had development. And therefore, if you've had development, you've got money coming into your area. And if you haven't, then you don't. So the answer to get, if you want SIL money, is build houses. And this particular pot of money this is the neighbourhood SIL, not the strategic SIL. And it's also the bit, I call it the leftover SIL, which was the amount of money that should have gone to Chignal Parish Council, but they are too small to get all of it from the money that arose from the Hollows development, because you're only allowed to have £100 per household in SIL money, and they're too small to get the whole lot. So this bit is a bit of an anomaly, and so this money really has to be spent within that neighbourhood, sort of either side of the St Andrews Chignals ward boundary, which is why it came from there. And the other bit was spent on the trees that are on the corner by Chignal Road, Copfield Road. So this is neighbourhood SIL money that's left over that should have gone to the Chignals parish, but they're too small to have all of it. And so this was a proposition to benefit that community. So this is spending neighbourhood SIL, which if houses get built in Great Waltham, would be going to Great Waltham Parish Council. The only reason this comes before us is because we don't have a parish council. So, yeah.
I think I do understand that. Are those SIL rules, are they national SIL rules, or are they city council SIL rules? If the latter, can they be addressed or challenged?
It's a national rule that 80% of SIL goes into the strategic pot and 15% goes to the neighbourhood, to the parish or unparished area.
Where it's spent, is that?
It's supposed to be spent, the neighbourhood SIL is supposed to be spent in the parish from which it arose.
That's not challengeable.
No. So we're not, it's not that we're struggling, well, in this particular case we have struggled to spend it because Mr Graham has been spent the last 5 years trying to give them the money. We've tried to find ways, and then eventually we had to accept the Scout Hall was going to fall down, so it was a good idea to spend the money on something else. And of course, the previous government, has abolished the SIL regime anyway, and I rather wish they hadn't. And so we have to wait and see what the new government is coming up with. Anyway, this is a relatively minor thing, but Councillor Davison wants to jump in on this.
Can I just respond to one point that Councillor Steele made about who pays the SIL money? Because I think this is a non-political point. The SIL was introduced, I think, by the previous administration, and it's, to my mind, successful because we collect a lot of money and it funds a lot of good capital expenditure on behalf of Chelmsford, and I say that specifically, not just the City Council. But who bears that cost? To my mind, it's not the people buying the houses because they're paying the market price for the house. And I don't think it's the developer. I think it's the landowner that is ultimately bearing the cost because the developer knows they're going to have to pay it, so they are not able to offer as much to buy the land. So I think that's where the money is coming from. And as I say, I think it was a successful policy that you introduced that we've continued.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Is that agreed? Is the report agreed? Right, thank you. So moving on to item 7. Councillor Dudley, come back? Yes. Moving on to item 7 from Councillor Foster on the rent policy.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to present the rent setting and fair charging policies for approval. The policies establish the procedural framework for rent setting in homes owned by the council, in which case there'll be regulated social rents, leased by the council, in which case there'll be affordable rents, and homes owned by others, where again they have to be affordable rents. And it's probably worth me quoting section 1.5 of the report, because it is quite... is there feedback? Am I too close? Do I need to bring it closer? There. Yeah, so the rent setting and fair charging policies establish the procedural framework for rent setting in homes owned by the council, which will be regulated social rents, rents in leased properties which must be affordable and therefore set at local housing allowance rates, and the charge for homes provided by others, which will also be set at local housing allowance rates. Basically, this regularises our position and ensures that we're in a much stronger position to take legal action if there are arrears. Obviously, people will appreciate that if somebody has become homeless and we are housing them temporarily, or we're housing them, we've assessed whether they are eligible for us to offer them housing whilst they wait for long-term housing, they still have to pay a rent or charge. But this might not be immediately obvious, I think, when, so this absolutely regularises and it sets the rate and it makes sure that we're complying with the social housing regulator demands as an RP, and that we are being fair to our residents. I think it would, I think our citizens really, I think it would be quite useful to also look at, in the rent setting policy, the 2.1 council-owned properties, in case that's confusing, because it looks as though there are going to be 2 different rates, but that is dictated by when we, when the stock was built that we are using. So anything that was transferred, which is over 20 years ago now, will be at this lower social, will be charged at this lower social rent. As I say, it's self-explanatory really, and it's really necessary to make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row, so that if we do need to take arrears action, we can. And I would ask that that is approved.
Any questions? Councillor Highlands.
Thank you, Chair. So, genuinely affordable homes in Chelmsford is a topic I think we all have discussed many times. So, Given that these are the poorest people in our city, I was surprised to see that a service charge was put on there over and above a rental charge. I mean, they can barely afford to rent, never mind the service charges. So is this an element that we are additionally adding as a city council, or is this just something that is on the charging sheet we have to make?
No, this is, the service charge will be for, and I'm sure Mr. Paul Gaylor will correct me if I'm wrong, but it is actually for services. So for, I'm just checking, but that was what I thought. It's for utilities. It is for electricity, water, etc.
So generally speaking, sorry, I beg your pardon, when we talk about service charges, we talk about land management. So there's none of that land management fees that are over and the top. So you're talking about gas and heating that everybody has to pay, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So just if I may ask, thank you. So I hope this new government will truly look at genuinely affordable homes and give us a position that we can provide residents with the opportunity to afford rented or market properties at a genuine affordable price.
I absolutely agree.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Although this only applies to the small number of homes that we own for temporary accommodation purposes, not general housing. So is that paper agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Next up, Councillor Moore on the Norwich to Tilbury pylons.
Thank you, Chair. And I would also like to extend my thanks to members of representatives from Little Waltham Parish Council, who I know are keen to present a statement, so presumably following my introduction to the report. Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. For the benefit of people who may be watching online, I'm Councillor Rose Moore. I'm a Cabinet Member for a greener Chelmsford. That means that I have oversight of planning matters, development management, parks and green spaces, and vitally embedding climate action into all of the operational side of the council's work, and hoping to influence partners to do the same across our district. So you will probably already be highly aware of the controversial proposals for the Norwich to Tilbury power line. We are this evening bringing this, I'm glad to say, to a public forum, just to voice in public and to be absolutely clear our objection to the principle of this. However, we do see that there is a need for clean energy. And in this case, the problems we have are that there is not another option on the table. So essentially, the huge amount of information that's in the accompanying consultation response is at a very high and technical level. This is because we know that so many residents across our district and indeed Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex will be affected by this, and we want to pay you the respect of making sure that we have covered all bases. So the objection is in principle. However, I'm very grateful to Sally Rogers and Michael Hurst, who was involved in the Heritage and Monuments Impact reports within the document. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval of the City Council's consultation response to this Norwich to Tilbury nationally significant infrastructure project. And it's the statutory consultation. The consultation has been extended until the 26th of July, and this was down to, I understand, webinars that had to be postponed during the pre-election period. The options this evening are that Cabinet agrees the proposed consultation response, which is attached at Appendix 1, and you can find that information online on the City Council website under this evening's meeting agenda. Or 1B, Cabinet recommends amendments to the proposed consultation. And also that Cabinet then delegates to the Director of Sustainable Communities, in consultation with myself as Cabinet Member for a greener Chelmsford, the Council's future involvement in the forthcoming independent examination, or Cabinet chooses not to delegate to the Director of Sustainable Communities in consultation with me, the Council's future involvement in the forthcoming independent examination. This is a nationally significant infrastructure project, and National Grid will need to apply for a development consent order which will be submitted to and examined by the Planning Inspectorate on behalf of the Secretary of State. It will be interesting to see going forward and following the events of last Thursday how this progresses. But please be assured that while the need for this clean energy transition is fully understood, it's proposed that the City Council maintain our objection in principle to the use of onshore pylons and power lines. We object because insufficient evidence has been provided to show these power lines are needed by 2030 and that the accelerated programme of consultation has... Apologies. That the power lines are needed by 2030 and that the accelerated programme of consultation has taken the project outside of the scope for what we call Holistic Network Design, HND, as part of the Offshore Transmission Network Review. Notwithstanding the overall objection in principle, the City Council has provided comments on the proposed alignment and raises concerns over the harmful landscape impacts, the potential for harm to residential amenity, and in particular, the harm to designated heritage assets along the route. I'm very pleased to say that Sally Rogers, our Principal Planning Officer, is here this evening should members have questions, and I will hand back to you, Chair, so you are able to take the statement from our representatives from Little Waltham. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Burrow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sally Rogers and councillors, thank you for that, allowing me to talk briefly. My name is Councillor John Burrow. I'm with the Little Waltham Parish Council. Little Waltham Parish, I should say, is, at least according to the National Grid, probably the most heavily affected community in the entire line. So I come to speak from that background. I'm going to talk about the report that we've just heard referred to by Sally, is it, or by Jeremy? I'm not quite sure exactly who's produced it. May not matter, but I've had a chance to look at the report and speaking from my position as councillor with the Little Waltham Parish Council, we have concluded that the report is absolutely first rate. It's hard-hitting, it's effective, and it's a good, strong response to the National Grid proposals. The response spells out in detail the damage the pylons will inflict on the two Walthams, both to the village's residential development and to the high-value heritage assets which are positioned all around that area. The report, of course, sets out in stark terms the important point, which is this is not just about Little Waltham. The damage that is going to be inflicted by these massive pylons, can I make that clear, is going to be damage to the city as a whole. And that is why I'm really very, very surprised to find no other representative here objecting. These pylons are so big, the lines linking the pylons are so enormous that they are going to inflict really significant blight on the entire city. And the report, I'm glad to say, recognises that. So taking it as a whole, we think this is a good report. We certainly support it, and we hope that you will too. I just want to say a couple of other points, if I may. The report also highlights the effect of the line on the nationally important Ash Tree Corner scheduled monument, which lies adjacent to Little Waltham. The report considers that at some length and in some detail, and again, it's a very, very well-written report. I just want to say this, that during 2022 and 2023, the Little Waltham team carried out extensive research into the reports of the Council for British Archaeology. That was the body that organised and carried out the archaeological excavations at the Little Waltham site, at the Ash Tree Corner site in the 1970s. These CBA reports we found were very clear, and that was the National Grid map of the Ash Tree Corner site was inaccurate, and in fact the Ash Tree site extended for some 500 metres, a considerable distance from the village and the river, meaning that it would actually pass right under the pylon line, raising the prospect that at least one of the pylons would be erected actually on the scheduled Ash Tree site. I should say that mentioned in the council response, more recent geophysics and trial excavations have confirmed exactly that position. That is to say, this awful pylon line is going to decimate a scheduled monument, and essentially by the construction of all the access roads, the pylons themselves will effectively destroy what is a really valuable and much loved part of Chelmsford heritage. So we wrote to Historic England and the Council for British Archaeology and many others with the information that the map and the site as put forward by the National Grid was wrong, and that it's not that the pylons would miss it as they are suggesting, but they would go right over the top of it. It was the Council for British Archaeology who were especially grateful to us for bringing the plans to their attention. We were the first people to do that, and they were grateful for our efforts in contacting them. The CBA said the Ash Tree site should be avoided by the pylon line. That's to say, it should take a route that completely avoided the Ash Tree site. They said that further archaeological excavation was necessary. That's going to be a real problem for the National Grid, isn't it, to slow them up and create all kinds of uncertainties for them. They said that they were entering into consultation with Historic England to review the boundaries of the scheduled monument. So we're now going to have a clear and certain picture of just how extensive the site is at Ash Tree Corner, and that it does continue out in a way that will mean the pylon line will have to go right over the top of it. So we would say that considerable progress has been made, therefore, in our opposition to this line. And can I reflect what my friend has said, that we are not saying that the line is not necessary in some form. We are simply saying that as it is currently routed, both through the Walthams and down the side of Chelmsford, that is the wrong route for it. And
thank you. Can I ask you to wind up?
Yes, I can. I'll just make one final point, if I may. At the National Grid presentation at the Chelmsford Racecourse, a chap called Andy Fell, who's a senior National Grid executive with responsibility for assessing the alternative routes to the line, said the Waltham pinch point was the closest and most difficult decision the National Grid had to take along the entire line. That is to say, it could have gone either way. When I explained to him that the Ash Tree site was likely to intrude right across the pylon line, he said this, that if that was the case, the National Grid would have to reconsider and reappraise the line. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are making progress on this. I think we are bringing our case home. I think we are winning the argument that the line through the Waltham pinch point is the wrong line. And so we do ask you to support this very, very effective, well-written, well-researched response that we've been hearing about, and as I say, support the draft report by the Chelmsford Council. Thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry for going over.
Thank you very much. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this relatively short. Can I start by first of all thanking officers Sally and Michael producing this report. And also thank you to the leader for allowing it to come to this meeting. It was originally the policy meeting, which was cancelled because of the PERDA, and it was going to go to delegated power, but I was keen it actually came to a public meeting so that people like Councillor Burrow had the opportunity to comment if they wished. However, I have to say that I think the response from City Council is, and the objections as laid out, I think it's extensive, I think it's well presented, and I think it's exhaustive. So I'm very impressed with what's been produced, and it has my full support. There's lots of other things going on. Councillor Robinson knows I proposed a motion to Essex County Council to oppose, and that got passed. And that also included writing to Ofgem and to ESO, because this isn't just about National Grid. This is also being driven by ESO timescales and Ofgem timescales. All the parish councils in surrounding Chelmsford which are affected have got together and formed a parish council group. We call ourselves North West Parish Group. There's about 14 of us, and they've all got the pylons coming through. They again are doing their own joint response, as well as advising all the parish councils to give a response as well. And I personally have been meeting with National Grid individually and through this parish group to talk about alternatives like HVAC underground and alternative routes. So a lot going on, but thank you very much for producing this report. Thank you to the officers. It's great, it's robust, and much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Hyland?
Thank you, Chair. Again, very good report. I enjoyed the read. I think it's just one of the things I was looking for is there any action that City Council can take? For example, is there any land that they own that they could go, ransom strip, you ain't coming through here?
Not that I'm aware of, no. We are just a consultee to this, so no, I don't think so.
And they just CPO it if they need, if the project was going ahead. So it's a nationally significant infrastructure project if it goes ahead. Any other questions? No? Okay, so are the recommendations on page 2 agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right, thank you very much. So moving on to item 9, this is the North Essex Economic Board, which has been functioning for a few years now, and it's grown in a couple of members, and it was felt that it was time to sort of formalise the partnership, and so you have before you a proposed partnership document to be signed by now all 8 districts and the county council in the north of the county are working together on to support businesses and a green and high growth economy as part of a dynamic and connected region and to support prosperous and inclusive communities. So those are the 4 strategic priorities for the North Essex Economic Board, and the partnership agreement is attached to the agenda item. Are there any questions? No? Is that agreed then? Agreed. Right, okay, thank you very much. Moving on, the highlight of the evening is now the amendments to the Constitution. We had a working group, and just after Mr. Sunak had stood in the rain. It seems to have been raining for all of the last 6 weeks. But, so the proposals before you on the Constitution are relatively minor, I think. So, as was touched on earlier in answer to questions, we're going to amend the Constitution and remove the Civic Centre panel because it hasn't met for 10 years since the Civic Centre was refurbished. So there are 3 proposals on page 5 of the report, Appendix 1, just to reference the fact that I can appoint a Cabinet member to chair the Community Funding Panel and to amend the Constitutional Working Group terms of reference. On the following page, the terms of reference of the Constitutional Working Group, Councillor Davison and I discussed this since the meeting, where it says, under functions and purpose, the Constitutional Working Group will meet as necessary to review any proposed changes to the Constitution. we're suggesting, I'm proposing, and Councillor Davison is seconding, remove the word any, because if it was very simple and could just go to Cabinet and then Council, it doesn't need to go to the working group just to change a word like this. So we're proposing to remove the word any. So those are the three sort of internal things. Councillor Davison.
I think we were proposing to add some words as well, and
yes,
I'm hoping that Mrs Brown can remember what they were, because I'm going to have to search for them.
Yes, well, just taking out the word any wasn't quite sufficient.
I think it might have been adding the words, this does not prevent Council adopting changes to the Constitution that have not been reviewed by the Constitutional Working Group. Are those the words you were thinking of?
Yes, they are, because I think the principle is that the principle is that we don't want to fetter the Council's ability to change the Constitution on grounds that procedurally this should have gone through a whole long-winded process. If Council wishes to amend, then it should have the ability to do so. So spelling that out felt to be important rather than leaving it ambiguous as to whether it did or didn't constrain what we could do.
Thank you. And then, so there's those relatively straightforward things. And then there's a set of other changes. If we adopt this new planning code of conduct, then there are suggested changes on page 17 of the report, appendix 4 to this agenda item. I won't read them all out, but they're highlighted in yellow in the report. They relate to recommendations going to planning when a local member wants to call something in, or when the committee wants to agree something contrary to an officer recommendation, and speaking time limits. So those are proposals consequential on us adopting this new planning code. Are there any questions? Councillor Hyland.
Thank you, Chair. In this document, it talked about some treatment of council. If a councillor puts a planning application, there has to be an objection to before it can come before a planning committee. I'm just wondering, is there a risk of perceived privileged treatment of councillors if you make the default that it doesn't come before committee and get a public scrutiny?
Of course, all that would actually be doing if there's no objection is to treat a councillor exactly the same as any other ordinary person. So it's not preferential treatment. I think the presumption in the code is that all applications for officers and members would go to planning committee. I think our experience has shown that where there are no objections, it doesn't really make sense to force something to go to committee for that additional scrutiny. Obviously, the applications are made public, they're available on the portal, people can comment on them. If somebody wishes to object, clearly they can do so as they would with any other person. But I think all we're actually trying to do by making that change is retain the City Council's existing approach. That's all that is being proposed. And it's certainly not preferential treatment. As I say, it is about treating councillors and officers exactly the same as any other ordinary citizen.
I just see not everybody sits looking at the planning portal day in, day out, and that would risk slipping things under the radar, and it might just be perceived as a privileged state that councillors are undertaking.
Although, as Ms Brown's just said, if anybody objects, however minor an objection, it would come to the committee, and neighbours usually object if they're to the slightest thing, in my experience. Any other questions? Councillor Hyland again.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of clarifications, if I may. An extension is provided to any person, consultee, parish council. So does this actually change the consultation expiry date, CED, I think it was called on the document? Does it extend it, change it for everybody, or just for the people that have asked for the extension?
I'm going from memory now. I believe that all this is doing, we had an issue with a parish council where there was an extension of time for representations, but because the constitution said 21 days, even though it was within the time frame for the consultation, it wasn't actually a valid response from that person. So, and this was around call-in, so it didn't get called in, even though the parish council or the ward councillor wanted to do so, because there wasn't a valid parish council representation within what the constitution currently says, which is 21 days. So that's what's behind that tweak.
But if you extend the time frame for somebody, surely you should extend the statutory dates, the CED date. For all.
I think it's across, it's not just for parishes, it's for anybody who responds. I think it just happened to be the case that we had where there was an issue was with a parish council.
I have one more different, I'll move on. I didn't get the answer I wanted, but I'll move on. The other bit was just to clarify, if there is a decision made at planning contrary to the officer's decision that we've had recently, that the reasons will be reported back not at that initial meeting but a future committee meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, that's our current practice. So again, all of these changes, apart from the one we just talked about the representations and the time frame, all of these are about retaining the existing approach that the City Council takes. So it's slightly different to what's suggested in the model code, which, you know, I have to be honest, I wouldn't usually suggest you make changes to a model code. As members will know, with the member code of conduct, I specifically advise against doing that. But I think on this occasion, they're fairly small changes, but we do think actually it's quite important to retain the way we do currently do things.
New question. This is about working groups, and I beg your pardon. Earlier, Councillor Whitehead talked about working groups, and I thought this was appropriate, that we should look to ensure that working groups all have terms of reference and a method of selection applied to the working group membership. For example, the community funding panel, given that this is public funding, it is politically balanced, I understand, is it? The community funding?
I think that one's on the executive side of a function, so that's not politically balanced.
Okay. So
or it's not required to be politically balanced. The ones that are on the non-executive or the council side, then they are bound by, well, we adopt political proportionality to those. We choose to do so. There's no requirement to do so. There is for committees, but for the working groups, we choose to do so, but not for the executive ones.
Okay. It's the supplementary question I had there was that if, because this is giving public funding, should the chair be a member of the opposition? But you're telling me that it's an executive working group, so the opposition have no interest in it, is what you're telling us.
Most councils, if you have somebody that's on the executive side of the council, like Cabinet, then it only has administration members in it, and the working groups would be an extension of that. That's what would be the norm in local government.
It's not a working group, it's a panel, it's an executive function, and the recommendations from the panel come here to Cabinet, so you can ask as many... No, you can't ask as many questions as you like. You can ask relevant questions that keep within the time frame. Right. Has anybody else got any other questions on the constitutional amendments? No. Okay. Is the report agreed? Thank you. Right. Well, that is it. There isn't any other urgent business, but I would like to return to Councillor Whitehead's question. So I now move that under Section 100A4 of the 1972 Local Government Act that the press and public be excluded from the meeting so that we can answer a confidential item.